Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we are plunging right into day 26 of the Sean Diddy Combs federal trial. Our mission is to quickly pull out the key insights from a day that honestly had some pretty unexpected turns and, well, some compelling evidence.
Yeah, this specific day, it gives us a really fascinating window, actually, into, the kinds of procedural hiccups you can get in these big cases, and also into the often disturbing evidence that's coming out.
Okay, so let's start with one of those hiccups. The day's proceedings got stopped, halted completely because a juror had vertigo, a medical issue.
Exactly. But what's really striking is this wasn't just some random event. It happened only 2 days after juror number 6 got dismissed. There were those concerns about his candor, remember, about where he lived. The judge even suggested he might have been trying to shade answers to get on the jury and stay there. So day 26, it really just highlights how fragile the whole jury thing can be in these massive high-profile trials. I mean, when jurors are literally getting sick or kicked off or maybe not being truthful, it makes you question how you even get a truly impartial jury. And that means for the verdict itself, it's a huge challenge.
Definitely. Okay, so beyond the jury drama, we saw some pretty important financial evidence coming out in court. Special Agent Delisa Pellin's testimony really zeroed in on Combs' money, didn't it?
Yeah.
She brought up that big bill, $46,000, almost $47,000.
Yeah. $46,786 damage for lost spent house damage at the Intercontinental back in 2012, and charged right to his Amex card.
And this was linked to those alleged freak-off parties the prosecution talks about, plus other bills like $500 for drapes, $950 for deep cleaning. What are they trying to show with all this?
Well, this is where the details matter, The prosecution's argument is basically that this paper trail shows Combs allegedly used his whole business empire, systematically, to finance and facilitate these parties. It directly backs up those racketeering conspiracy charges.
Ah, okay. The pattern.
Exactly. It suggests an organized setup run through the business, not just, isolated bad behavior.
Got it. And Pellin's testimony also touched on communications after that 2016 incident with Cassie Ventura. Like Combs texting her, "Call me, the cops are here, and I am about to be arrested," right after she left the hotel. Even though the cops weren't actually called.
Right. And then triangle her 5 times in 22 minutes, no answer. Plus, calls to Eddie Garcia,
the security guard, who got paid $100,000 for the video footage. So what's the significance of bringing all that up?
Well, those texts, especially the false alarm about the police and then the payment for the video, it all suggests, from the prosecution's view, a really calculated effort, an effort to coerce, to control the situation. So it's not just about the alleged assault itself. It feeds into claims of obstruction of justice, hindering things.
Which bolsters the racketeering charge again?
Precisely. It shows alleged intent and a pattern beyond the initial act.
But then, during cross-examination, the defense pushed back hard on that coercion idea. Attorney Tinny Geragos brought out texts from Cassie, one saying she preferred a Friday night gathering so she could recover over the weekend, and another where she replied, "LOL, sure," when after Combs asked her to meet him at a hotel. How does the defense play those?
Well, this puts that whole consent versus coercion battle right at the forefront. On the surface, yeah, those texts could sound like she was willing, maybe even enthusiastic. But, and this is crucial, you have to weigh that against Cassie's earlier testimony, where she said she did these things to keep Combs happy.
Right.
So it adds this really complex psychological layer. It challenges that simple yes means yes idea of consent, especially when you factor in the alleged power dynamic. It forces you to ask what consent really means in that specific context.
And adding to the intensity, the jury saw more graphic video footage from these alleged parties. They had headphones on.
Yeah, and spectators apparently could hear sounds leaking, described as erotic groans, and the jurors' reactions were visible, shaking heads, looking away. One younger guy apparently chuckled when it started. That's intense.
Nice, have a huge impact.
Oh, absolutely. Evidence like that, it's visceral. It's designed to make the alleged acts feel very real, very explicit. It underscores the seriousness, obviously, but it also just reminds you of the heavy emotional, psychological burden on the jurors in cases like this. They're dealing with some really disturbing stuff.
So, looking ahead, where does the trial go from here? We know Brendan Paul's testimony got pushed back.
Right, Combs' former assistant, the alleged drug mule who has immunity, he was expected, but now it's looking like Friday. His testimony is seen as pretty pivotal.
An insider.
Exactly. The prosecution expects him to connect more dots, and they're now saying they could rest their case by Friday, which means deliberations might even start next week.
Wow. Okay. And Combs isn't expected to testify.
No, and the defense strategy, there are reports they might actually admit to domestic violence, which is a state crime, much less serious.
To try and avoid the federal sex trafficking and racketeering counts?
That seems to be the thinking. Those federal charges carry, 15 years to life? So admitting to the lesser charge could be a strategic gamble to avoid the really heavy sentence. It just shows the incredibly high stakes here.
Absolutely. So as we wrap up this deep dive on day 26, what's the main thing that stands out to you, the thing you hope listeners really think about?
For me, it's how clearly this day exposed those really complex, often uncomfortable lines between power and consent and control, especially in these high-stakes legal fights, and also just the raw human element, from the jurors physically reacting to the deep complexities around what consent even means under alleged coercion. It really makes you consider how all these factors play out in our justice system.